Greetings, mortals. What I will be discussing is my experience at GenCon. I'll start with some general thoughts about GenCon. I didn't run any games, I didn't play in any games, and I know that that's the complete weekend for some people, but I just didn't know what to expect, and there were other kind of goals I wanted to achieve throughout the weekend. I went in with the goals to get some content, which we ended up doing, even though it was slightly different. Actually, that's a good place to start. Why don't I talk about expectations meeting reality? I had some expectations that didn't get met when I went to GenCon about what I was going to be able to achieve. I really had very little expectations about what GenCon was going to be like, and it was a cool learning experience just to get to know the convention center and the surrounding buildings, to do a lot of walking, to get kind of a vibe for what GenCon is. The thing that I found maybe the most useful was going to seminars, which there are a whole bunch of, and I went to ones that were specifically focused on content creation and what I want to do with this channel now and in the future, and there was a lot of big resources for that, and I think they're super underutilized because there was almost nobody. I mean, none of the seminars that I went to were like full. You get to meet people who are in the industry, right? And ask them questions. I did have a cool panel that I went to about tabletop media, which is, helpful for me specifically as a content creator. Afterwards, I got to shake the marketing director of Paizo's hand, Aaron Shanks, and that was cool, introduce myself. And networking was kind of a thing to do. That was a goal of mine that I feel like I maybe didn't do as much of it as I expected, but I did have a lot of good interactions that are kind of the building blocks of potential relationships with people in the industry that I want to be a part of. I want Tabletop Sandbox to be this, I have this vision of it potentially becoming a media company, and GenCon was a cool place to start growing my relationships in the TTRPG sphere that I eventually want to make a job in and like a career out of. And there's a lot of people with a lot of useful job experience that were on those panels and were sharing things that you wouldn't be able to learn from, studying the field. Lessons that only experience can bring. On Saturday, I had 3 separate celebrity interactions, which was interesting. I say celebrities. They were perhaps more accurately people that I only recognized from the internet and had never met in person before. I ran into a couple of guys from Legends of Avantris. That was very cool. Then just right after that seminar, I ran into Damien Haas of Smosh, who was there doing an actual play. Probably my favorite one is on the floor on the Sellers Hall. I actually ran into Trevor Duvall of Me, Myself, and Die, which is a really cool channel if you haven't checked it out, where he at least started off doing solo role-playing, and a lot of the tools that he uses in season 1 of that, the Mythic Game Master emulator, the Perilous Wild sourcebook that I did a video on that you can check out from just a few weeks ago. I'm just a big fan of his channel. I ran into him on the floor and unintentionally interrupted him while he was in the middle of recording something. I recognized him and I said, "Oh, Trevor!" He kind of stopped and turned around, and I saw that he was recording himself on his phone, and I said, "Oh, sorry, are you in the middle of something?" And he hit stop recording and put his phone in his pocket, which was very nice of him. I appreciate how gracious he was. If by some odd reason you're watching this, thank you, Trevor. It's very nice to meet you and shake your hand. And he was cool enough to ask about my YouTube channel when I told him it existed. He was like, "Oh, what's it called?" And so, yeah, that was a very cool interaction, especially because I'm such a big fan of his channel. So you can brush shoulders with celebrities at GenCon. One of my friend's girlfriends, I had an interview with her. She worked for Renegade Games, Anais Morgan, and that was a really cool interaction. She works in their marketing department and gave us a great interview. And then she actually put in a word over at Feral Indie Studios, or it was the Wet Ink Games booth, and I got to talk to Charles Ferguson Avery, who is one of the co-authors of Into the Cess and Citadel, which won a Silver Emmy. It's not a game per se. It is a system agnostic source book, which is right up my alley. I had a relatively quick, but a very cool and informative interview with him, and then a conversation with him and Alex, the other creator of that book. But yeah, I mean, even just the tiniest connection, if you go there and you make a good impression, you can meet all sorts of people and have good conversations. And even if you don't have connections, you can find people to have good conversations with. I had an excellent conversation with a couple of the guys at Gallant Knight Games. We had a great conversation about role-playing. One of them sold me on the game that he had created. It was really fun because this is a place where everybody there, likes TTRPGs, and some of them, or a good portion of them, especially the creators, like them as much or more than I do. And so it was cool to, I guess, talk shop isn't exactly the right phrasing, but people who have shared interests, and you can talk people's ear off about your shared interests. And unlike most of the conversations I have about my hobbies, they actually care and they're interested and they enjoy listening and sharing their own stories. And you can see some more detail about some of the things I talked about on either this or the main channel. I didn't have a single bad interaction with anybody at the con, and everybody there was super cool, super happy to talk about their stuff. Like I said, it's cool if you're interested in TTRPGs or board games or art. There's something there for everybody, and overall a really positive experience. So let me get into talking about some games that I bought. This is a brand new game called SEMA. Basically, you're playing as one of the local peoples of, I think it's called SEMA, is the land where you're at. The land was invaded by this tyrannical theocracy, and then that theocracy has left, but in those, years where they were in this land, they established themselves. The vibes of this game are you are tomb raiders going into tombs of saints of this now fallen theocracy and stealing stuff from those tombs. I like the idea of grave robbing these saints that, are of a religion that your characters probably don't subscribe to, because it was a religion that was kind of brought and forced upon the people of this land. It's got a really interesting rule system as well. I just started looking into it. There are 5 skills: bash, dash, sneak, shoot, think, and sway. And in each of those you have a die assigned to it: a d4, d6, d8, d10, or d12. Say you have a d10 as your rating in bash, right? And so you roll a d10 when you roll bash for the first time. And then the next time you roll bash, you roll a d8. And then the next time you roll bash, you roll a d6. And then the next time you roll bash, you roll a d4. And then d4 is the lowest you can go. And you're trying to hit a 3 to 4 to succeed at a cost. And then a 5+, you fully succeed. And the higher the result, the better off you are. But it's a really interesting system that encourages you to start with what you're good at, but as you go, everything kind of evens out. And then you'll have an equal chance of using this action or this skill and this skill. Another one that I bought solely off of vibes is this deluxe set of the Fallen RPG. Just starting to flip through these. The art in these and the aesthetic is so cool, and lots of random tables. But I mean, just the aesthetic and the vibes alone. That's the bestiary right there. It came with Hilgrab, which is a city setting for it. Like, I just saw this and I knew that I was gonna get so much enjoyment and so many valuable resources out of this. Even if I never ran this game specifically, I knew I could use this. They've got NPCs, a whole bunch of them, lots of random tables. And then what really sold me and made me decide that I needed to get it was that there is a deck of tarot-esque cards that are used as a resource for randomly generating stuff. And the art on these is just incredible. They've got things like yes, no, no and, yes but, yes and on the cards. They've got random items, brass key, coins, bear trap. They've got names and locations of things: the bog, remains, hideout, the omen. And then they have words like reveal, disease. You ask a question, then you consult the deck, you draw a card, and you pick what makes sense. Aesthetics wise, this is definitely the dopest thing that I bought. My third and final purchase at the Gallant Knight Games booth is this game I guess, called Arium Create. It's a game where you work together with people to build a world. William Munn, who was one of the authors of this, he asked me if I was into world building stuff, and I was talking about how, as you have seen on this channel, I use Microscope to world build, and he said, well, that's more about history. This is specifically about building a world, and this is designed to be run with sticky notes and markers. I kind of got the sense that it was like what I use Microscope for when I'm world building, but specifically designed for world building, and I was like, oh yeah, absolutely, I'm gonna pick this up. It involves coming up with ideas in a limited time frame, voting on which of the ideas people like the most. I'm looking forward to reading through it and using it to create a world. I love collaborative world building, and having a structure to facilitate that is really helpful. My final purchase, Into the Weird and Wild by Charles Ferguson Avery, who is the guy that I talked about who won the Emmy for not this book, but a book that is very much like this, Into the Cess and Citadel. Into the Cess and Citadel is a system agnostic source book slash toolbox meant to be used for generating a city. And this is like the wilderness version of that. So rather than developing a city, this is about developing a wilderness. It's laid out so beautifully. It's got lots of random tables, bestiary, strange and savage items and spells. This is something that I could see myself using a whole lot, which is, I'm really excited to get into this. I'm really happy with all of these things that I bought, and some of them are kind of exclusive. Like SEMA came out the Thursday that was the first day of GenCon. But yeah, that's my haul. I hope that you maybe saw something that you liked, but I just wanted to kind of share my highlights from GenCon and talk about some of the cool stuff I got. If you have any questions or suggestions about content I should make out of any or all of these games, please comment below, let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Good night, mortals.